All right, let's dive into something that, well, it's pretty easy to overlook, but is absolutely critical to our economy and, frankly, our national security. I'm talking about the ships that power global trade. There's a brand new executive order that's aiming to tackle what it calls decades of decline in America's maritime industry. So we're going to unpack exactly what that means, why it's happening, and take a look at the very ambitious plan to try and fix it all.
To really get a handle on the urgency behind this new policy, you really only need to look at this one chart. It says it all. The United States builds less than 1% of the world's commercial ships. Meanwhile, China builds close to 50%. According to the White House, this isn't just some dry economic statistic. They're calling it a critical national security threat.
And look, this isn't just an observation coming from some analyst or think tank. Nope, this is the U.S. government's own blunt assessment, pulled word for word from the executive order itself. It says that decades of government neglect have directly empowered our adversaries. Wow, that is incredibly strong language, and it really signals just how seriously this whole issue is now being taken.
So yeah, this has definitely moved beyond just a theoretical debate. On April 9th, 2025, the White House made its move. They issued Executive Order 14269. And honestly, the title kind of says it all. Restoring America's Maritime Dominance. This is it. This is the official response.
Okay, so before we jump into the solutions, I think it's really important to grasp the sheer scale of the problem. When you look at the global stage, it's like a tale of two completely different fleets. This right here really breaks down that core imbalance. In the US, we're building, well, very few ships, and they cost a lot more to produce. At the same time, competitors like the PRC are cranking out half the world's supply for a fraction of the cost. And this isn't just about the bottom line. The order argues pretty forcefully that this massive gap creates a major security risk. That's the whole reason for this order's existence.
So the big question is, what's the plan to fix such a massive, decades-long problem? Well, the executive order lays out a pretty detailed blueprint. It's called the Maritime Action Plan. Let's break it down.
So, what exactly is this Maritime Action Plan, or MAP as they call it? Well, it's not just one new rule, not by a long shot. The order calls for a comprehensive, whole-of-government plan. And what's really important to note here is the massive scope. We're talking about revitalizing everything from the shipyards themselves to the workforce, and the deadline is incredibly tight. The full plan is due in just 210 days.
And when they say whole of government, they are not kidding. Just look at this list of agencies involved. We've got defense, commerce, transportation, labor, state, homeland security, and the U.S. Trade Representative. This just shows they're treating this as way more than just a naval problem. It's an economic issue, a diplomatic one, and a labor issue, all rolled into one. The level of coordination that's going to be needed here, it's staggering.
Okay, so this whole Maritime Action Plan is really built on three core pillars. The first pillar? It gets right to the foundation of the problem, actually rebuilding the physical infrastructure of America's shipyards.
So, the obvious question is, how do you pay for all this? Well, the plan outlines a three-pronged financial strategy. First, it starts with a new Maritime Security Trust Fund to make sure there's stable, predictable funding. Then, it adds a shipbuilding financial incentives program to get private investment flowing. And finally, it creates these things called Maritime Prosperity Zones. Basically, these zones will offer regulatory relief to encourage development. And what's really interesting is that they're not just talking about coastal areas. They want these on the Great Lakes and major river systems too.
But look, rebuilding shipyards here at home is only half the battle, right? None of it matters if the global market isn't fair. And that brings us to the second pillar of the plan, leveling the playing field and confronting foreign competition head-on.
This pillar takes direct aim at what the order itself calls unfair competition. The plan involves investigating the PRC's market strategies, potentially slapping new tariffs on things like Chinese-made ship-to-shore cranes, and closing some key financial loopholes. A huge part of this strategy also involves working with our allies, trying to present a more united front on trade policy.
Let's actually look at one of the specific loopholes the order is targeting, because it's a pretty big one. So right now, some foreign cargo ships avoid U.S. port fees by docking in, say, Canada or Mexico, and then just trucking their goods across the border. The solution they're proposing is actually pretty simple. Require all that foreign cargo that arrives by vessel to clear customs at a U.S. port first, and to give it some real teeth, any cargo that tries to bypass this process gets hit with the fees it should have paid in the first place, plus a penalty.
Think about it. You can have the best shipyards in the world and the fairest markets, but none of it matters if you don't have skilled people to do the work. And that brings us to the final, and maybe most critical pillar, investing in a new generation of American mariners.
Yeah, this pillar is all about people. The order calls for, well, everything from expanding mariner training programs and credentialing pathways to modernizing the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy. It also includes creating new national scholarships for advanced maritime studies, and this is a big one, assessing ways to make it easier for experienced sailors leaving the Navy to transition right into the merchant marine workforce.
So what's the timeline for all this action? Well, it is incredibly aggressive. A deregulation review is due in just 30 days. Most of the agency reports and plans, 90 days. And the final complete maritime action plan has to be delivered to the president in just 210 days. I mean, that timeline alone sends a pretty clear message. This is an urgent priority.
And that really brings us to the big question, doesn't it? This executive order is without a doubt one of the most ambitious attempts to reshape American maritime policy in decades. It's a detailed blueprint for sure, designed to reverse a problem that was decades in the making. But the real challenge, as always, will be in the execution. Is there going to be enough funding, enough political will, and enough focus to actually truly turn the tide? Ultimately, the question this order leaves us with is whether this comprehensive plan is actually enough to restore America's dominance on the seas.